Coming up in the news, the Deputy Prime Minister giving a financial report to the nation. Two groups speaking out against the Grand Bahama Power Company. And hear the story of a mother who gave birth during Hurricane Dorian 1 year later. The Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, Northern Edition.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, I'm Natalia Hall. Thank you so much for tuning in. Topping the news, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance giving a comprehensive financial report as the House of Assembly resumed its weekly sessions today. The DPM outlining the country's fiscal deficit and the government's plans to move forward with the country. Jamila Mizik reports.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable K. Peter Turnquest, giving an update on the government's fiscal and economic plan in the House of Assembly Wednesday morning. He says the government continues to implement measures to manage the ongoing crisis and to mitigate further economic fallout while stimulating economic consumption and preparing for the country's reopening.
The budget was predicated on a base case scenario which anticipated muted economic activity in tourism in the first quarter of the fiscal year, that being July to September of 2020. However, the necessary but protracted shutdown in August had a significant impact on the business community and has caused some deviation to our initial revenue forecast for that month. Further, a failure to jumpstart tourism before the end of the year would likely result in a more troublesome scenario.
The finance minister noting that although lockdowns and curfews are effective and necessary, early performance indicators for July and August show their significant dampening effect on revenue receipts.
For the first 2 months of the fiscal year, total revenue came in at approximately 77% of the budget projection for the related period, largely reflecting the slowdown in economic activity in August as a result of the lockdown. As for expenditure, since June, we have seen the expected ramp up in spending related to unemployment support, food assistance, and other forms of emergency relief in line with budget expectations. The first 2 months of the current fiscal year also show that expenditure was slightly higher than anticipated.
He says fiscal outcomes for the 2019-2020 year were predominantly driven by the unprecedented impacts of Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic.
During the last fiscal year, revenue performance weakened by $337.1 million to $2.1 billion, comprising 87.2% of the revised budget. This happened against a backdrop of subdued economic activity in the final quarter of the fiscal year amid the shutdown of the economy. Expenditure grew by $231.7 million to $2.9 billion. Specifically, recurrent expenses increased by $86.3 million to $2.5 billion, featuring approximately $34.7 million in expenditure related to Hurricane Dorian and another $17.8 million to support the COVID-19 measures.
He notes that as part of the economic mitigation strategy, they have maintained critical expenditures in priority areas such as public health, social support, public infrastructure, small business support, and employment retention, including the retention of public sector employment levels.
Public health spending has accounted for the largest COVID-19 related outlays to date between last fiscal year and the current year. It remains a priority focus and a core part of our fiscal and economic strategy. The government allocated some $35.2 million in the current budget to the Ministry of Health to assist with the detection, treatment, and mitigation of COVID-19.
The minister adds that employment retentions and strengthening the domestic economy by supporting small businesses continues to be a priority focus and a core component of their fiscal and economic plan.
The Ministry of Finance is currently using the $1.3 billion borrowing authority approved by the Parliament under the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Under this authority, last month, we accessed $248 million as part of a $300 million bridge financing deal. We are also in the process of concluding a $200 million transaction, and actually I can say this morning that it's concluded. Concluded a $200 million transaction with the Inter-American Development Bank and a $40 million facility with the Caribbean Development Bank. Further, we are readying ourselves for a capital market transaction as soon as market conditions permit, and have under consideration other transactions to ensure that we can cover our budgetary requirements for this fiscal year.
Jamila Mizik, ZNS Network News.
Meanwhile, a number of local businesses getting a jump start as Grand Bahama attempts to bounce back from its economic woes. Those businesses receiving some much-needed financial support from the Grand Bahama Port Authority Business Development Department. Tonight, Jay Philippe tells us that recipients say the financial assistance is timely.
The Grand Bahama Port Authority stepping in a major way with financial assistance to a number of businesses in Freeport post-Hurricane Dorian. The RISE grant, which stands for Restoring Industry and Sustaining Employment, provides local businesses with up to $10,000 to help restore business. Senior Manager of Business Development at the port, Derek Newbold, says the implementation of the grant is designed to help businesses that would have suffered substantial loss from the storm.
It was a partnership initiative between the Grand Bahama Port Authority, Mercy Corp, and we had donor partners in the American Red Cross and Bacardi Limited. As of today, we would have awarded some 256 grants under that program. And the value for those grants total somewhere around $2.4 million. And so that was one way that we felt it was important for us to step in and support the small business community.
The Grand Bahama Port Authority also introduced another program known as the Small Business Recovery Program, specifically geared towards supporting micro businesses to capture as much business that did not meet the criteria for the RISE grants.
It's what we call the mom and pop shops sometimes, where they may have not had a valid GBPA business license or even a government license, but they had a vendor's permit or a peddler's permit. And you may have had one person operating in the business, but it's their sole source of income. So we wanted to make sure these people were not being overlooked. And so we created this grant program, providing grants of up to $6,000 for them. It was a partnership initiative with the Bahamas Red Cross and the Small Business Development Center. And as of today, we have actually awarded about 104 grants under that program at a value of almost $500,000.
One of the businesses receiving financial assistance is On Point Designs, that has been in operation since 2017. Entrepreneur Chris Stan Ramming says the RISE grant program has been beneficial for his business.
The RISE grant came in a perfect timing, because after I would have lost my father during the storm in Abaco. I lost the house and then came to find out where I was supposed to open up in September. Went to the shop and the shop was also flooded. I lost some brand new equipment in the storm also. So I was at a point where I was wondering what to do. So I asked the Lord to guide me and, help me to, figure out how to get things back together. So the RISE grant, I applied. About 2 days later, I got an email and, they told me that congratulations, I've received, so I was kind of like shocked. So basically, when I got the RISE grant, the funds, it helped me with, like I say, repurchasing equipment, inventory and stuff like that, hiring new staff, paying some utilities and everything like that.
Another small business that was impacted by Hurricane Dorian but has since bounced back from the storm thanks to the GBPA grant funding program is Go Getters, which is a delivery-based service business that has since seen a demand in business amid the global pandemic.
Dorian came and really did damage to it with water damage. So it's down for maybe like 2-3 months. I was using a bigger vehicle. It wasn't as useful or gas efficient as the delivery, so it really helped me in regard to getting back up and running. I actually working on deliveries to 8 Mile Rock in West End. So we're just trying to bridge that gap. There are people who might need something from in the city, out there, as well as launching and more in Nassau.
I'm Jay Philippe, ZNS Network News.
Thanks, Jay. In a matter of weeks, the Grand Bahama Power Company is scheduled to increase levy charges to its customers. The stabilization and recovery charge was initially delayed, but now the power company is expected to continue with its plans beginning October 1st. But tonight, a concerned group is speaking out against the implementation of those proposed fees. Jay Philippe has more.
According to reports, as of October 1st, the Grand Bahama Power Company is expected to implement a storm recovery and stabilization charge for customers. The executive members of the coalition and concerned citizens, led by President Eddie Victor, strongly opposes the idea of company imposing further levy charges on consumers.
Should customers take monies that are helping them stay afloat and pay a power company for a storm recovery and stabilization charge? No way. It makes no economic sense that you have all these millions of dollars being poured into the economy to keep it afloat, and then you're gonna put a further charge on it. It shows the heartless nature of this power company.
Victor says the Grand Bahama Power Company, which is a foreign-owned Canadian company, has proven to be insensitive and out of touch with residents and more concerned about the profits.
To try to implement this charge October 1st, that they're dealing with corporate performance. They're dealing with timelines. And what this means, they're trying to please shareholders. Shareholders that most of them are not even in the Bahamas. They're non-Bahamians. So you can only milk a cow so far. In fact, this cow, Grand Bahama, has been drying up. So there's no more milk that you can get from it.
Vice President of the Bahamas Hotel Association, Kirkland Russell, adding that based on his conversation with residents of Grand Bahama, they are in no position to handle any increase at this time.
Emera seems to be a company who is hell-bent on profit, and they have no regard for the people of Grand Bahama. Irregardless of what they say, the facts is in the pudding, and the fact of the matter is, for any company to believe at this time in Grand Bahama that the resident or the customers ought to pay for the loss of your infrastructure is inhumane and wrong to the people of Grand Bahama. It is totally wrong. This is absolutely not the time.
Russell says to implement this charge on October 1st on the island that has to now rebuild its economy shows a lack of compassion.
We understand that Emera would have lost a whole lot of customers, some 300+ in East Grand Bahama, a few hundreds over the island of Grand Bahama, including areas like over the bridge. We understand they would have lost revenues from closing or the downsizing of hotels during this season. But we believe that Emera is still making a handsome profit, and they could bear the burden. And so, like every other business on Grand Bahama who had to deal with losses, some people had to deal with losses not only of business, not only of their contents. Some people also had to deal with loss of families.
The coalition and concerned citizens will host a virtual town meeting on Thursday, September 24th at 7 p.m. on Facebook and Zoom. Victor also offering his advice to customers if charges are implemented as planned.
Pay only your electricity bill and challenge that cost, protest that cost with the Grand Bahama Power Company. But also, we're going to say to everyone, it's time to let your voices be heard. If there's ever time you're going to protest about something, you need to do it. And let's do it with a strong voice. Let's do it with a strong protest to this company and let them know they cannot push over Grand Bahamians anymore.
I'm Jay Philippe, ZNS Network News.
Well, late this afternoon, another group of protesters springing into action against the Grand Bahama Power Company. The group calling for better customer service, the removal of the stabilization and recovery charges, and for the GBPC to be regulated and governed under IRCA. Spokesperson for the group is Daquan Swain.
Right now, because in no way, no shape, and no form it should be where my light bill is competing with my mortgage. It should be no way and no shape or form where my light bill should be competing with my mortgage. So we are standing for ourselves, up to this company right here, the Grand Bahama Power Company, for estimating our bills for during a national pandemic when already Grand Bahamians are suffering. This day marks the day when Grand Bahamians will no longer stand for what has been happening yesterday, what has been happening last year, what has been happening 10 years ago. The only time we're worrying about is right now. And today is the demonstration that sets the foundation to show that we will no longer accept what's been given to us, and we will fight for what is our right to be treated fairly on where our naval strength is buried.
The Grand Bahama Power Company issuing a response to the concerns of residents, noting that the company continues to rebuild in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian amidst a pandemic. The release adds that at GBPC, they are customers too, and they know that any increase in the total cost of electricity is concerning for residents. Officials say they also appreciate the influence that rising electricity costs can have on an economy. That is why, at the onset of the global COVID-19 pandemic, the SRS charge was delayed for 6 months as a measure of support to customers. The SRS charge is based on consumption and will fluctuate month by month depending on a customer's usage. The charge equates to an average of 1 cent per kilowatt hour for all customer classes, which will result in an increase of less than $7 per month for the average residential customer. The statement says with prudent energy use, customers can minimize the impact the SRS charge has on their overall bill. It concludes that the GBPC team is committed to educating customers on ways that they can better manage their energy usage to minimize any impact the charge has on their monthly bill.
My name is Lipa